Sure, thanks, Teresa.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, who's that? Oh, wow. Okay, that was quick. Thanks, Autumn. Good morning. We are here in the Joint Fiscal Committee.
Hey, Jenny.
Hello, the meeting is now starting. Thank you, everyone. Today is Thursday, November 13th. We are here for the Joint Fiscal Committee's November meeting. We'll be here all morning together. Senator Lyons, I'm probably going to do a very bad job of noticing if you raise your hand, so please feel free to unmute and remind me that you're raising your hand.
Thank you. And thank you for accommodating me. I was in Montpelier yesterday, but I have a cold that won't go away, and it is
Thank you for
terrific
keeping your cold to
to be
yourself.
Zooming. Thank you.
I'll share that.
Appreciate
I'm not sharing it.
Thank you. So we have a fairly packed agenda as per usual, and I'm going to do my best to keep us all on track. So if things need follow-up outside of the meeting, that's what'll need to happen and probably will happen. So first things first, I would love a motion to approve our minutes from October.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Representative Harrison moved that we approve minutes. Representative Scheid seconded. How's our clerk doing with life? Ready to go?
We don't,
All those in favor of the minutes? Just checking in with him.
okay,
He needs that sometimes.
he's good.
All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the minutes have been approved. Thank you. So next on the agenda, we're gonna start with sort of the standard federal revenue update that we have built into this particular season's round of Joint Fiscal Committee meetings. And then second, we'll go into a federal shutdown update. We're gonna attempt to keep those agenda items as separate as possible, and that will probably not be possible, but we're gonna give it a go. So Secretary Clark, if you want to join us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
One.
Sarah Clark, Secretary of Administration. Lovely to see everybody today. My first agenda item has to do with the monthly federal adjustments tracking that was in Act 27, Section E 127.2. And so I have filed the report with the committee, and there are no changes from the September report that I testified on at your last committee meeting. The federal government, as you know, was shut down for until yesterday. And so, hypothesizing that perhaps there weren't any changes because employees were furloughed. So no new items to report as it relates to that.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Okay,
Of the brevity.
yeah, thank you. So the shutdown.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
It's been like quite a week, I think, for everybody, watching this, and I had a different slide deck when I went home last night than I do this morning. Similar content, but like there were certainly things that we didn't need to talk about today, and some new items that we should talk about. So I did provide a presentation this morning, where the shutdown is over. So I think that's great news for the functioning of our country and state government. It ended after 43 days, the longest in history. US Congress passed a continuing resolution last night that was signed by the President of the United States that essentially provides the funding to reopen the federal government. Included as part of that continuing resolution are 3 full-year appropriation bills in agriculture, military construction, veterans affairs, and the legislative branch. I think for us here in state government, most notable is the funding of the SNAP program for another year. The bill also includes provisions that requires federal agencies to reimburse states that spent their own funds to carry out federal programs during the shutdown. I think that is an interesting provision that, from my perspective, is still too early to assess what that means in the context of our SNAP program. So just noting that because I think it's important, but don't know yet what it means for Vermont. It extends funding for several programs that expired on September 30th through January 30th. Noting that in bold on the slide in that we will likely once again be facing a similar conversation as we head towards the end of January. But I think the good news is that it is reopened now and includes funding for programs like the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TANF. And so we have some runway now to get back to more of a normal state of state government. As everyone is aware, it does not include an extension of the Affordable Care Act premium tax credits that at your last committee meeting, you took some testimony on that topic. And so that is still an outstanding item. So for me, reflecting on what this reopening means, the big question is like, what's the timing to reopen? So what does it like, how long for funds to start flowing in a couple of critical areas? And so as you flip to the next slide, it leads kind of right into what has been a topic of much discussion related to the Three Squares Vermont SNAP program. As this committee is aware, the emergency board met at the end of October and took action to issue a 15-day one-time emergency state-funded state-funded benefit for SNAP recipients, as well as a grant to the Vermont Food Bank for distribution to the food shelves. So the emergency board did that. I think what is a critical consideration for right now is the time it will take for the federal government to issue to states their November benefits so that we can process it. The team at DCF, and you're going to be hearing testimony from them next, so I don't want to steal their topics, but they are gearing up to be able to move as quickly as possible when we have the go-ahead from USDA. The LIHEAP program, again, my colleagues at the Department for Children and Families can provide you more in-depth analysis, but we are on target with issuing the LIHEAP benefits in process. Another item that, as a result of the federal shutdown, and you are all aware of it, I'm sure, relates to the Head Start programs and some of the cash flow crises that a few of those organizations faced due to the timing of their fiscal years and not having an agreement, a grant from the federal government to provide their funding to operate. These are organizations that, to the nature of how their funding flows, they don't build reserves typically. They get paid from the federal government and then the cash goes out the door. And so even though it's great news that the federal government has reopened again, there are a few organizations that will still be facing some cash flow concerns while the federal government kind of ramps up and issues those grants. So the Agency of Human Services, Department for Children and Families, is preparing to, in process of issuing loan agreements, if you will, to two of those organizations so that they have the cash flow that they need right now to be able to keep operating and providing those important services to needy Vermonters. And those funds will be repaid to the state once the federal funding and the grants are issued to those organizations. And so,
yeah. What's the timing of getting those contracts out? Because I know we've been talking about this for actually a while now. So is it?
So I think we've been in, I guess, in-depth conversation for the last maybe a little bit more than a week. And so as I understand it, those are in process. The organizations have been contacted and they were finalizing the language. DCF may have a more updated sense of when they're going to be executed, but the criticality of the timing is understood in terms of running out of money this week.
Yes.
So, and then even though the federal government has reopened, as you can imagine, it will likely still take a couple of weeks for those like agreements to be put in place. And so we're just prepared to support in these kind of cash flow arrangements as needed. So, yeah.
I'm assuming that the terms of the loan are interest-free. Are there any fees? Is the administration absorbing the cost of administering it? How?
Yes, so interest-free, and I don't, to be completely honest, I have not seen the terms of the agreement, but that was the understanding, is that the state was using some of its cash to provide this short-term support to be repaid when they receive their federal funding. But we're not looking to, I don't even know if we would have the authority to actually earn money, but I think it's a great question. But no, we're not planning to charge interest or fees on these organizations. Yeah.
Senator Pritchett?
Those organizations that had contracts or grants that ended after January 30th, will they be the same situation, or are there efforts to try to in some way during the time that the government's going to be open?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I don't know the answer yet, other than we'll continue to be vigilant in tracking those that had later kind of starts of their fiscal years, and hopefully be able to take steps to avoid any sort of challenges going forward. I think the good news about this model for this like limited circumstance for these organizations is that by doing what we're endeavoring right now, it provides kind of a roadmap for the future for this very limited, with the expectation of being repaid.
And this might be a better question for Miranda, but is it coming, and I know that we have a provider stabilization fund for childcare. Is that where the money is coming out of?
Yeah, so it's within the child development division budget, they have an existing base of $250,000 that is used to provide emergency financial relief to childcare organizations. So obviously the need right now is more than that $250,000. And so they'll be using their existing general fund appropriations that for these purposes, in addition to the $250,000.
Sarah, so just to reiterate, Head Start gets their money directly from the federal government. And that's why it doesn't come through the state. So that's why you need to do some kind of loan arrangement. Will you need any kind of legislative approval to do that? Because what you just said is you're potentially going into your regular budget line items for that department.
So we don't believe we need legislative approval. And the understanding is that those general funds will be repaid in a timely enough manner before the end of the fiscal year. In talking with the Agency of Human Services and their availability of cash for the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, which is where this money is coming from, is that they have the money through May or June in terms of when they would need to be repaid. So we believed it was enough of a runway to provide the relief, understanding we'll get repaid, and, you know, just being able to be nimble and meet a need.
And joint fiscal office and the legislative members of the E-board have been in regular conversations with the administration to see, is the emergency board sort of needed to help with this, or is it something that the administration can handle on their own? And I'm grateful for all the work that everyone's been doing to make sure this works out. Senator Lyons?
Thank you. It sounds like it's a grant that you're giving out and then asking to be repaid. So in that sense, it's not, it's less of a contract than it is and more of a grant. So I'll leave it there for now, but I did have another question and I'll hold it for later.
Okay, thank you, Senator Lyons.
Okay, great. And then some of the other items are more moot, but I thought folks might be interested in that during the shutdown, you know, obviously IRS wasn't able to issue employer identification numbers, EINs. And so, which I think was a challenge for some businesses in Vermont. And so the tax department did implement an internal procedure to be able to support those businesses and get them up and running. And then on the back end, we'll work to reconcile now that the IRS is open. And then USDA child nutrition, I think last month we talked about how they had switched from quarterly allotments to monthly allotments. What I would have said to you is that we have funding through mid-December, which is true, but now with the federal government reopening, I think some of the concerns there are allayed. And then I think federal staffing challenges as they ramp back up. You know, I think we'll know more in 24 hours, 48 hours in terms of availability of staff to work with us, answering some questions that maybe have been unanswered for the last month and a half. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome, Miranda. Can someone help pull another chair? I can sit over there. You're very welcome to pull a chair up and join Miranda.
You don't want to.
Would you like me to share the slides or are you all set?
I think we're all set. Thank you so much. So you don't have to, get through that. Mhm.
So good morning. For the record, I'm Maria, the Deputy Commissioner of the Economic Services Division.
And I'm Sandy Hoffman, interim commissioner for the Department for Children and Families.
Thanks for joining us to talk about food stamps.
Yeah, I thought I would start with some good news related to Live Week. So I know I was asked about SNAP, but just thought I would also share about Live Week because we did talk about that at the e-board as well. So last night, our benefit run went. So we issued $11.1 million to 11,366 households. That money actually goes to 156 certified dealers, and the average benefit was $992. So people will start seeing those funds credited to their accounts. The fuel dealers usually need a couple of days to be able to navigate that, but people's fuel benefits are all set.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's right. Good news. And I'm going to not repeat much of what Secretary Clark said. It has been a wild ride. And so I did try to kind of recap for everyone where we've been, how many memos we have received. And I do want to thank, though, so after the e-board meeting where we were given the funding for 15 days of the food benefit, we were able to issue that on November 7th. So just a few days later. And then my thanks goes to the Vermont Food Bank and Hunger Free Vermont, the community action agencies for the funding, the $250,000 as well to the Vermont Food Bank to get out to food shelves. We moved that incredibly quick, and it took a lot of coordination, and it truly was a success to be able to have more offerings for Vermonters so quickly. So that was also a nice success that I wanted to share there. And then it brings us to where we are now. And I've done my slides prior to the shutdown ending. So I guess I will just kind of focus on, I think, what people are most curious about, which is right now we have not heard, I keep checking my email. We have not heard from the USDA, giving us guidance on when we could anticipate to get the funds. But I do want to let you know that we have shifted all resources so that we'll be poised once we have those funds to be able to get them out for Vermonters. So hopefully that process will be relatively smooth from the federal government. But that is our anticipation, that we will have the benefits to people within a couple of days. It just takes, on EBT cards, is usually a little bit quicker. Into people's bank accounts just takes a little bit longer for people to have access to those funds. But as soon as we know, we will also be messaging out to Vermonters.
Can you be more explicit about the days? So from the moment you get the authorization from the federal government, and I have questions about that, and then sort of what happens.
Yep. So then we have to have our system run the benefit. And so that's what we are staging, right? So that we are ready to do that. And
how long does that take?
So I'm going to say it's like half a day,
Okay,
like 4 hours. Okay. So it depends on what time of day we receive this. And then the file goes over. Usually that next day, funds will be on EBT cards. So relatively quick. People with a direct deposit, because we have cash out households, that usually takes, I want to say it's like 2 days because banks vary. And we saw this when we did the state benefit as well. When banks had the funds available, really varied for Vermonters. I also want to thank our banks because I think a lot of them navigated that beautifully as well with the state funds. That's my understanding. So it should be within 2 days. So if we heard this afternoon, tomorrow we could anticipate, right, with money on cards, and which I'm just clearly saying, I have not heard this yet. Just knowing that there's a lot of people recording us right now, and I don't want any high hopes for people. And then I would say on Saturday, the funds would be available.
That's
And
the earliest.
if you heard tomorrow, how does the weekend? And I want to thank, I know your programmers have been working a lot of hours, so I want to thank them explicitly as well as all the rest of your team. If you hear tomorrow, what then happens in terms of benefits over the weekend?
So benefits would be on cards for Saturday, and
Okay.
the banks would more than likely be Monday. Just like the weekend does impact that.
Definitely the banks have been great. Your team has been great, and all the Vermonters that have been trying to feed themselves have been like
Amazing.
really getting through it in really significant ways, as have the signs in all the grocery stores. The communication across the state has been quite remarkable, actually. It's really, people are really stepping up and showing up for each other. And so you've said that you received all of these different missives from the USDA, which I think to some degree have contradicted each other day over in certain ways. So what will clarity look like for you?
I think at this point, we're looking for how much money, like, will it be 100%? The November benefit is coming to us. That would be clarity, because you're right, we have received 2 memos in the last couple of weeks that gave us new allotment tables. One was at 50%, which is a little bit misleading. We got an adjusted one was at 65%. But that didn't actually mean that 65 or 50% of the benefit was going out to every household. So what we are hoping is that the USDA will be very clear about the November benefit as ready to issue. And the funds are going to, the funds go directly to our vendor. They don't come to the state. So that's what we're looking for to have happen.
For the funds to arrive at the vendor.
Or to know that
At
the
100%.
credit, they have the
Okay.
credit that is needed.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a process question for you then, because the state extended the $6 million. And then the federal government is doing either 50 or 65%.
Or 100. No,
Or 100%. If it's 100%, then what happens to the amount that the state has already advanced? Is a recipient likely to receive 100% of their benefit plus what the state already advanced?
I think that is most certainly a direction that could happen. Right. So if the federal government says, here's your 100% of the benefit, then that is what is going to happen. And I think that would be fine. Right now, we aren't anticipating a 65 or a 50% benefit.
You're anticipating 100.
Right.
Okay.
Subject to getting any.
Subject to, we don't want to count our chickens, right? Yes. Yeah, 100%.
For the month, when you say 100%, what do you mean?
That we would receive the November benefit.
You know, part of November, that's not gonna.
Right. Well, I can't say that for certain. That's why
You're
we're.
anticipating. Then there was a line in Secretary Clark's slide, I'm guessing this is just because the slide's a different time. Where it says federal guidance also, in your slide, it says federal guidance also explains the state's funds will not be reimbursed. In Clark's slide, it said requires federal agencies to reimburse states. Is that just a different in timing, or are they different things? And do you understand the question?
I do.
Yeah, please.
So my slide was referencing a provision that's in the actual continuing resolution that makes that statement. I tried to be measured when I'm providing you that information, but I don't know exactly what that means. And we still would assume no reimbursement for what the state did. The state took action on an emergency basis with the understanding that we wouldn't be reimbursed from the federal government. And so, but that is a provision of the bill, but more general and not specific to any one program.
And different than the federal guidance that explains that state funds shouldn't be reimbursed. That in
Correct.
Was that guidance issued before the vote yesterday?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Timestamp.
So last week, it was very, very confusing to follow all this. And the courts got involved and said, you must use the contingency fund. And then they were going to do 100%, and then it was scaled back to 50 or 65%, whatever the number was. And I thought I heard that the administration was going to do that. Did that happen at all, to the partial payment?
So we did not issue out a partial payment that, as our system isn't as nimble, as some states. And so we were programming it to be able to issue out a partial benefit. The 65%, which was the last memo that we had received from the USDA.
But you never got that. Never.
Right. Nothing has gone out.
And that partial payment was particularly problematic because it wasn't a uniform partial payment for everyone. It seemed to be, some people got zero and yeah.
Correct. That's a part of, the saying 65% was misleading because it really had changed the table that we would compare how much money people would be eligible for. But if you had income in your household, it could reduce to where some people would have $0 benefit. And then some people could get up to 65% of the benefit. So that was, can be challenging.
Madam Chair,
So I think Representative Wood.
good, yeah, she was, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Kimball. So I just want to summarize because there's been a lot of percentages and things thrown out. So right now, we're anticipating that there will be some missive from some guidance from the federal government that says 100% of November will be issued at some point in time in the next few days. And we issued a partial payment for a full payment for half a month, 15 days worth. And so the potential that people will receive a little bit more in November than what they would have been receiving under normal circumstances. So can you tell me how much like the average benefit is for the average SNAP benefit for individuals in Vermont, like per month? So just trying to figure out how much more they would have received on average. I realize there's a range.
Right, there is a range, Mike. I don't know that I actually know it off the top of my head, because there is quite a range, but I can certainly move back with you to what that would be, because we do have.
So, I mean, the figure of like $187, $189 a month kind of thing has been thrown around. Is that anywhere near close to? I'm just trying to figure out, so that would have been maybe $90 or something, $95 that people
Have received already.
Right.
Right. I think there is a range, and I'm like, I actually feel like maybe I have that somewhere. So let me think for a second. But yeah, I think we have some people who've gotten like that.
Yeah.
$90, and then there are others who would have received, depending on your family side, you could have received a couple of $100.
Right. I'm just trying to make the point that it's not a huge amount of money that individuals may receive in excess.
I remember seeing a graph somewhere in the Zoom meetings in the last week, and an individual was $30 a week. Which
That's right.
Well,
first.
Let's not,
Yeah.
but let's wait for.
Yeah.
we'll confirm that, but
Commissioner Grant. Yes.
But at this point, we don't know whether or not, given what Secretary Clark said, whether or not the money will go out to individuals or whether the state will be reimbursed definitively. Is that correct?
I believe, well, I guess there's nothing definitive, is what I would want to say, but we believe that we should be getting guidance telling us to issue out the November benefit.
The federally.
The whole benefit and so if that happened, then we wouldn't get reimbursed for the state, but there is language that says
I think those are two separate things.
they're two separate things.
Whether we get reimbursed or not.
So I think, do you want to try to explain it one more time? Or would you like me to try to summarize?
Sure, you can.
Okay. So the USDA guidance that we're waiting for is going to direct us when we could issue the 100% benefit, which is fully federally funded. Separate, buried in the continuing resolution, and I appreciate that Secretary Clark found it in there, is a question that is state relief during the shutdown would be reimbursed writ large. What that actually means is probably open to much interpretation over many months, but maybe we'll get the money back and maybe we won't. And maybe we would get money back for the 15-day payment. Maybe we get money back for the money we sent to food bank. But that's sort of separate from the federal benefit being issued. Does that?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes it a little clearer that the two are separate.
Representative Kimball, I think you wanted to say something.
Well, I guess I'm trying to be crystal clear that recipients of the SNAP benefits should not expect to have a clawback if they get 100% of the federal benefit and the 100% of the 50% benefit that the state issued. So that's, I want to make sure that we understand that it's up to us. We've either out $6 million from the state for that benefit, or he might be reimbursed from the federal government. That's possible.
Is there any clawback on the table from your perspective?
We are not looking to pull back those benefits.
That's what I want to make sure.
And I don't think there's any clawback from the e-board perspective as well.
Right.
All right. So we're still waiting, but we're waiting slightly more hopefully than we were waiting yesterday. Is that a good summary of it? Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions about this aspect of food stamps? I think you were gonna talk a little bit about not the shutdown, but federal changes that have resulted in a loss of SNAP benefits for certain Vermonters.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And so there is a slide deck from last week. We testified before our Housekeeping Services to give information. So if you'd like more, but I think I'm going to hone in on what I believe the key issue that is being raised is about those who have the special immigration visas, those holders. And so the new law, and this became effective on July 4th. It was upon passage of the law. So on July 4th, said that they're entitled to the same benefits as refugees, and refugees have been removed from eligibility. So there is a new memo that we received in the last couple of weeks that we are reviewing specific to this topic. I don't have new guidance from that. Our program team and our legal teams are reviewing that, but that is the population. In total, it was 119 households that were impacted, 86 households that lost eligibility, 33 that had a partial decrease. And that was a total of 385 individuals. That was the total loss across those 119 households. It was approximately $57,000 a month. And then there's also been a question, I think this is something that had come up last week for us as well, was can you reissue, can you just issue state funds? We've just demonstrated that we can issue state funds and that it is a challenge because we just issued state funds to people that are eligible for SNAP. And right now we're saying that these 119 households, some of them still have some people that are eligible. That's why so there's a partial decrease. But they're not eligible. And so for us to issue a state benefit would be problematic because they aren't in our system as active households at this point. And that would be to just put them back in would be an error. And right now we're trying to be very cognizant of errors because of another part of the law that was passed, which is saying like if your error rate goes 6% or above, the state is then responsible for 5% of the 100% federal benefit that we're issuing out right now. And Vermont, that's looking like it could be like $8 million. So a significant amount of money. But we continue to look at this. What we were able to do for this population was to issue a grant to USCRI and ECDC, who help support these households. And so they, and I think it just happened last week, excuse me, we're able to support households, and we didn't give any directive of like give a certain amount, you know, based on household composition. It's really like they're working really closely with these households, and so understand, you know, other factors that they might have at play, and how can they support them. So there is money available for a food benefit there, and so that was a total of $106,000 that went out. From AHS, Tracy Dolan's unit to those two partners to be able to provide support.
Is that going, I think I remember you saying it was $57,000 monthly. That was sort of the loss in benefits.
Correct.
And so is the benefit that you're sending out to those refugee agencies equivalent to that, or is?
It is not.
It was a one-time 100 and?
Yeah, but it's a 100, yes, a one-time 106,000 ramp down. While we're hoping people are connected to other services. But
And folks, we're gonna take more testimony about this later in the meeting. I just didn't wanna put the deputy commissioner in that sort of.
Right. This is a deputy commissioner question.
Yes, yeah.
Where's the money coming from?
So it was already sitting within so it was repurposed in existing unspent grant funds that Tracy Dolan Shop had already.
That would have gone out for some other grant need for refugees if it wasn't for.
Which I think it was unspent. It wasn't, once again, it wasn't that we were looking for this funding. This funding. It was that we felt like, okay, we have this here and this is a good use of these funds to help provide a ramp down.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood, because when you testified before my committee, the 119, the SID folks are a subset of that 119, right? And how many of that 119? I just didn't want people to have the impression that because I think that we still have some, issues with that particular group of people.
Right, and I don't have the full, and part of that is like down to the detail of who exactly fits into that category. But we know, like, so in total, yes. Thank you for the clarification. That is how many households were no longer eligible under HR1.
And was the $106,000 meant for all of the 119 households, or was it meant for only the SIB folks?
Really leaving it up to USCRI and ECDC to determine. There might be some folks who fit in the population that have found some other resources. And then there could be others who don't. So it would be in total, they have the option to be able to support the 119 households, but they're determining what level of support and to whom.
So it theoretically could be split among any of those 119 households. And then was my understanding also that the grant agreement, at least as originally envisioned, did not accommodate any new folks who might arrive here post. These are only people who had been eligible for SNAP.
That's correct.
And so is there any assistance being provided to those individuals?
It would be through this mechanism, right? Like they aren't eligible for SNAP, so we aren't able to help them. And I guess that would.
So are they eligible for the 106, any portion of that 106,000? That's what I'm trying to get at.
I think my understanding was no, that we were just supporting those that had already been here. But I think that would be a better question for Tracy Dolan, just to understand, is there other mechanisms in place through these entities to be able to support new arrivals in some other way? I'm not positive.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you both for your testimony.
Head Start, you had a question about Head Start. It's
Did I?
early
Great. What was it?
next week, there should be.
Oh,
I asked
thank
for
you.
the
Okay.
timing,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you. That's great. Thank
So
you very
next
much.
week, early to midweek. Okay, great. Thank you.
Don, would you like to join us? Hi, thank you. We were just hoping for an update on the money that went out and upfront.
We give you that.
Thank you.
Record, I'm John Sales. I'm the CEO at the Vermont Food Bank, and I live here in Montpelier. First of all, I just want to, second what Secretary Clark and Deputy Commissioner Gray talked about, just the great cooperation. And the food bank is really proud to be a partner with the state in supporting our neighbors during this really challenging time. I think it's given us an example of what we can do, and I think that's a good thing. So the food bank works in partnership with more than 300 food shelves and meal sites and other community organizations all across the state. With the $250,000 in state funding that the emergency board authorized, we received that, and given the state's intent for these dollars to be distributed and spent on food within days to fill in that gap, the food bank developed a formula-based approach to make sure we're allocating funds equitably across the state and to make sure no area of the state was missed. So the formula considered several key factors, including county population, poverty rates, SNAP eligibility, and the number of individuals that get served in those areas.
And within each county, the funding was directed to a subset of network partner food shelves that could most effectively and quickly put the funds to use. So we wanted to make, there's a great variation in our food shelves. Some of them are literally a closet in a church basement. Some of them, like our community action agencies, are full-time professionally staffed food shelves. So the priorities were partners that could respond within one day to make purchasing decisions and have the capacity to acquire food quickly, within a day or two, that were open regularly, because we have some partners who are open maybe once a month for a few hours. So we want to make sure these were ones that had hours. And that served the highest number of individuals in need, because we do have some of that information. And then fill geographic gaps to make sure that even if it wasn't the perfect partner, we were getting every part of the state. So the funds were allocated to every county, a total of 56 of our 136 food shelves. The requirement was to use the funds solely to purchase additional food from any source and to distribute that food with the intent of meeting the increased traffic as a result of No 3 Squares benefits being loaded on cards on November 1st. And we know that by the 7th, half the benefits were in there, and it was very prescient, I think, of the state to do that. I appreciate the effort that the state of Vermont made to support our neighbors. So the food bank, it was, like everything around this challenge, it was an all hands on deck effort. It was Thursday that the emergency board made the decision. By end of business Thursday, we had spoken to all 56 of these food shelves and gotten them to do the authorization, the written authorization that was necessary, because we did have a grant agreement with the Agency of Human Services, and we want to make sure there was some reporting. And so we had authorizations, and by the end of the day on Thursday, we had distributed the cash through automatic transfers to 36 of those 56 partners. By the end of the day, Friday, all 56 had their money, and so food was going on the shelves. I really want to call out those food shelf partners because most of them are volunteers, and they put in that effort, not only to figure out the mechanics of getting the money, but then get out and actually get the food and get the food on the shelves. Several of our partners increased their hours, were open extra days to make sure that our neighbors were able to access that food. This is an ongoing challenge, of course. Hunger didn't start with the government shutdown, and it will end with the government reopening. The food bank has also seen, as you might expect, some increase in philanthropic support. And so we made a decision because it was only 56 of these 136 food shelves that got some of the state money to take an additional $150,000 of donor funds, and we're distributing that now to the remaining food shelves who didn't get some of the state dollars. So some very generous donors that stepped up and wanted to make sure that every one of our partners and all the people in the state who were really suffering the consequences of this were supported. About 25% of that funding went to the community action agency partners who are, I appreciate all the support for the state, and I know that they have needs outside of the food work that they do. And so we're proud to partner with them. Just want to quickly talk about need that we're seeing. So the food bank has our Veggie Van Go mobile produce distributions that we do all over the state. And within just the number of events we've done in November, we've seen a 45% increase over our 4-year average of families coming. It's been different in different areas of the state. Some places we've seen numbers flat, but some places like Rutland, for an example, we saw a huge increase in the number of people showing up, almost double. And overall, the numbers have been up, but we expect that they will continue. And then finally, I just wanted to share some of the reaction that we've gotten from our partners. In St. Johnsbury, the Shares Corporation saw a quadrupling. They actually moved their location. They saw a quadrupling of the number of people they were serving from about 40 to 50 to 136 in November showed up at their place. At Brock, you know, I mentioned in Rutland, we saw a huge increase in our Veggie Van Go. Brock has increased the number of days they're open. They've increased their hours. Tom Donahue's the CEO there, said, you know, he's seeing this need in the community and thinks it's here to stay. And so they're making this long-term commitment to continue to be there. In Lamoille County, Lamoille Food Share, just on one day, saw 6 new households visiting for the first time. They're concerned about the long lines and maintaining inventory, and we're obviously working with all of our partners to try and get food out. We actually have been ordering more food, and we've increased this month by about 40% the food that we're bringing into the food bank, so that we can have more for our partners. Brattleboro has seen, FoodWorks saw 45 new households and 113 new individuals come in October. This was even before the shutdown happened. And then finally, the Upper Valley Haven, another great partner, has been seeing about a 25 to 30% increase in folks coming in for food. So I don't expect this to really decrease dramatically, although this takes the pressure off some of the folks who were getting SNAP benefits. Obviously, the food bank in our network serve a lot of people who aren't eligible for SNAP, and will continue to struggle. But again, I just appreciate being able to partner with the state and the support from the legislature for all of our Vermont neighbors.
Thanks. I think Secretary Clark said something about how the work in this moment is a real example and a template for what we might need to be doing possibly more regularly into the future, both because of, you know, federal instability and the needs of our neighbors. And I was just struck in talking to people in my community as the resources came into our food bank, that it was a lot of folks who go to the food bank or support people who go to the food bank, said it was the first time that the shelves have felt even close to full enough in a very long time. And I don't want them to go.
Applaud what you've done and know this is under really short period of time. And I kind of listen and monitor what mine are doing. And I don't know if this is across the state, so this is anecdotal from my area. They were all up across my county. The donations were up significantly in communities that have more. The donations and I'm gonna name a community, Johnson. The donations are down in Johnson, and the number of people coming in was up higher than any other. So I'm a little concerned that if we do things that go forward in the future and we refine this, that the need isn't even amongst all the communities across the state. And I'm particularly concerned in communities like Johnson, where the need was up higher than everybody else and is, quite frankly, a poorer community.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, you know, the food bank did some restructuring recently, and we actually increased the number of people working with our partners and trying to figure out ways to lift up partner capability. And, you know, I said we ordered more food, but as soon as food comes in, it gets ordered and goes out. So we're not able to really keep any inventory right now, but I appreciate that.
It isn't even across
And it never has been.
And it's not just on population level too, and what communities can afford. Well, Food Share put out a thing and said, adopt a family. And so, and they had a great uptake to that. Johnson, on the other hand, is a poorer community, has not had that ability. And the thing I really stress about the food shelves and what they're doing is it's protein at the end of the month, and the flexibility that they can get to get protein to young families is important.
Thank you very much, John. Appreciate all your work. And then do you want to?
Just plug in.
Thank you. Good morning.
I want to thank you before you even start for the incredible collaboration to get us the best information from all over the country through the last few weeks.
It's been our real honor to do what we consider is our job for Vermont. So, you're welcome. And I'm Honora Horton. I'm the executive director of Hunger Free Vermont. I would like to start by thanking all of you, members of the Joint Fiscal Committee, for the opportunity to provide testimony today and for all of your really hard work. I don't know, it just appears that the legislative session has basically started or something this year. I'm sure we're all thrilled about that. Hunger Free Vermont, we submitted a memo to this committee and the members of the emergency board 3 days ago with a set of recommendations regarding Three Squares Vermont and for the next actions that we believed it was really essential for the state of Vermont to take to ensure that the 64,000 people who participate in Three Squares Vermont would continue to receive without these gaps that John was just testifying to, right? The gap at the beginning of November when people did not have their Three Squares Vermont benefits and the real challenges that that presented to our charitable food system and all of our communities around the state and thousands of families. So we want to make sure there's not that further interruption going forward. And it's been clear that the federal government is an unreliable partner in making sure that doesn't happen these days. However, and I expect that this will be the only time that I will say this, and I've never said it before, but most of the recommendations that we provided to you all 3 days ago in that memo, we are not recommending any longer at this time. So you can actually disregard my recommendations, only this once. One-time thing. And I really appreciate this committee's concern and our Department for Children and Families concern to be vigilant and be careful in making any definitive statements at this time because USDA has issued so much contradictory, problematic, and in our view, illegal guidance and over the last few days. So, however, it does seem that things are on track for the state to be able to issue Three Squares Vermont benefits for November with federal funds in the next couple of days. And that is a very good thing. So at this time, I think my recommendation to you all would be to remain vigilant and not make any final decisions about what to do around Three Squares Vermont benefits and a state replacement for those until that guidance really has been issued and the Department for Children and Families is really able to send the files to the EBT processor and people are able to get those funds on their cards.
And I'll offer in this moment that what is likely the plan and everything's been changing every hour for the last long while is that the e-board will meet this afternoon and will likely move to meet again tomorrow. So that we can give one more day for things to happen, but that might change by 1 o'clock. So again, take that with a grain of salt.
And
Yes.
again, we just appreciate the thoughtfulness and the strategy, and we support it. So the unanimous recommendations made in October by this committee to the emergency board to use state contingency funds to replace Vermonters' 3 Squares Vermont benefits in full for the first half of November. And the emergency board's positive and unanimous approval of that recommendation, and the Department of Children and Families' swift action to get the systems and data into place and get people their benefits for the first 15 days of November were right and necessary actions. They were right because they helped keep people fed and well. They were right because they helped stabilize Vermont's farmers and food businesses and communities. They were right because they honored our Vermont values of ensuring the best possible outcomes for us all, even under very challenging circumstances that were caused by a manufactured and totally unnecessary crisis that was not of our making here in Vermont. So thank you all, to all those parties I have named. And to the hundreds of voluntary community efforts and the network of overstretched charitable food providers who came together to bridge the benefits gap, thank you all as well. I would like to close by inviting all of you on the Joint Fiscal Committee and the members of our state administration who are here in the room with us today or listening in to allow yourselves to be present to the enormous difference you have made. And for all of us to be present to what our collaboration on the road to true and lasting food security makes possible. And I'm going to do that by reading to you just a few of the communications that Hunger Free Vermont has received in response to our efforts to get the word out about what our state government did in November. So this is from a social worker. I have families reaching out this morning saying they received their food benefits with great relief. Thank you for the work you do. I see the direct benefit and it means a lot to me. These are from 3 Squares Vermont participants. Yes, things are pretty scary, but having the information so clear and consistent, knowing that intelligent and resourceful humans are with us facing these difficult times is like turning on a light in a shadowy basement. It spreads hope. I and we SNAP recipients throughout the state deeply appreciate your work. You're making a huge difference for us. I am a senior Vermonter on 3 Squares Vermont and depend on that benefit to be able to feed myself. I cannot afford to be without SNAP, either for November or permanently. As a very low income Vermonter, I'm also on Medicaid, and I don't have the assets to replace my normal monthly 3 Squares Vermont benefit. Without 3 Squares Vermont, I would be hungry and food insecure, as would all the other Vermonters who qualify for and need SNAP. Thank you all you are doing to help protect food security and 3 Squares Vermont in Vermont. And finally, I wanted to thank those in power who so kind-heartedly chose to make financial resources available to Vermonters. Congress could take a few lessons from them in terms of compassion, humanity, and basic human rights. I myself am a disabled SNAP recipient, and I'm so very grateful for the EBT benefits that I receive. I was thinking about all of the families who have children to feed and the veterans who risk their lives for this country to keep us safe, and for the elderly and disabled individuals who have no families to lean on for support. They, like myself, were probably wondering how the hell they were going to be able to afford groceries next month. What a blessing to live in a state that supports basic human rights in the midst of a country that seems to have misplaced their humanity. That's really all I wanted to say. Take good care of yourselves. And thank you for advocating for those who need it most. Thank you.
Thanks, Honora. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna switch gears considerably, and focus on FEMA. Because the emergencies don't seem to end these days. Douglas Farnham, thank you for joining us. We have two agenda items, with you today. Thank you. The first one is some follow-up on, sort of recent findings regarding some, challenges with our contractors and our contractor relationships. And then the second one is to learn a little bit more about our recent disaster declaration, the federal government's response to it. So I'll turn it over to you to kick us off.
For the record, Douglas Farnham, Chief Recovery Officer for the state of Vermont. Is my audio coming through, Madam Chair?
It is, thank you.
Great. Apologies, I'm testifying from a conference and just had to do a different setup today. So thank you for having me. I believe the contract in question is the Guidehouse Disaster Recovery Contract. This was procured in 2020. We actually had fortunate timing where we had been talking about and planning in the administration procuring a master contract for disaster recovery and support services. And we procured that, and then we had that in process, and then we were able to deploy it to support our efforts related to coronavirus relief fund, the ARPA state and local fiscal recovery. And then unfortunately, we added the 2023 and 2024 floods onto that contract. The intention was always for that to be a 5-year contract to cover declarations made between 2020 and 2025. And therefore the work for the that was referenced in the article, and I would say that was reporting done by a reporter. It wasn't an audit finding, and it wasn't from FEMA. It was from a reporter's perspective and information they had gathered from speaking with various people familiar with the program. So primarily we deployed a disaster case management team through the Guidehouse Master Contract with a statement of work at the Department of Children and Families. And in order to deploy a grant for disaster case management for the 2024 floods that is just under $3 million, Madam Chair. So with that bit of context, are there any additional context or detail you want me to start with, or are there specific questions that you'd like to go through?
Does anyone have any specific question?
Yeah.
Yeah, Representative Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Farnham. You made a point of saying that this is something that was uncovered by, the media essentially. And I'm just, has your own information, I guess your own sort of self-audit confirmed that information?
So I would say, Representative, that while the media article had some unfortunate personal attacks on some state personnel, which, is always hard for me to read, which I think are unfounded. Most of the facts were not incorrect in that story, but they were slanted and without context or information. I would also say that we had already identified the issues with implementation costs, and we'd already taken corrective action before the reporter entered the frame. So we had a program that we had to build rapidly. Whenever you build a program rapidly, and we've used Guidehouse Assistance for building over 300 programs in Vermont, many of them rapidly, right, from Coronavirus Relief Fund. They were a little bit more hands-on this time, and we were tracking invoices. And when we noticed that the admin rate was not going to be sustainable, we met with them and immediately discussed, okay, how do we adjust our structure so that we can reduce the administrative elements of this work so that we can get more money to disaster survivors and case management services. And they immediately worked with us on that. We're in the process of amending their statement of work, but they also agreed to, reduce their team immediately under our, just with us sending emails and having conversations. So I would say that everything in that story was something I was already familiar with. But it was, I think, framed as negatively as you could, especially not having experience having built programs, which has been what I've been doing for Vermont for the last 4 years, essentially, is building new programs and trying to get them up quickly and make sure they're properly constructed.
So just one follow-up. So, did the state's, grant or contract agreement, did the organization not have, a level of specificity, like a line item budget or, a maximum amount to spend on administrative costs? It sounds like it was maybe a little wide open.
So the grant that we got from FEMA had a certain budget, and we have to manage every program implementation, and no implementation is linear. So your administrative costs are always going to be sharper upfront. And one of the things we ran into was building the program in the context of the LTRGs, the long-term recovery groups already existing, the capstone case management services winding down, and having 2023 and 2024 flood survivors needing to sort between those, and also working with the Vermont Community Foundation and the Monday.com platform. We were implementing in a complex environment. So it was a lot of stand-up effort. And it was a little bit higher than I would like to see, but it wasn't anything outside of the pale compared to other implementation efforts. One of the things that we dealt with was FEMA took over 8 months to approve our award. So people were needing these services, and we had to build the program as rapidly as we could. So whenever you push resources at a rapid development, you're going to see that spike in cost. And so we recognized it. We said, okay, how do we amend our plans, adjust them going forward? So I don't think it's in Vermont's best interest for federal grants to be insanely detailed so that anytime anything small changes, you have to amend. So I think our award was fine. We're working with FEMA right now to clarify a couple of things, but the overall numbers aren't going to change significantly on how we're devoting our resources. So it was a snapshot of right after our implementation phase, and our team is now right-sized for the implementation, not the implementation, sorry, but the execution phase, where we've got case managers providing services, our connections are built, our systems are built, people are trained, and so those investments will start paying off.
Okay, I guess, just for the record, knowing the amount of minutia that's contained in state grants to some of our pretty small nonprofits and the required reporting requirements for those organizations, it just seems a bit odd to me that we wouldn't have had a little more specificity to understand, other than, X number of positions that they were unable to then fulfill. But there are other questions, so.
Representative. Yeah, thanks for coming in, Douglas. How much money was, maybe wasted isn't the right word, was an unnecessary use of funds before this got figured out?
$0, Representative. It was all necessary administrative work. It was building the systems, training everyone, putting everything together.
So I did read the article, and maybe I read something wrong, and I get the slant and all of the things that you're talking about, but it sounded like there were some facts that I haven't heard you dispute about, like 7 people showing up at a meeting that didn't need to be there from Guidehouse, for example, and then them billing their staff time for that. That to me seems like an unnecessary use of funds. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
So, Representative, when I worked at the tax department, one of my roles there was an implementation of project director. And in order to implement a project, you all have to stay on the same page and move quickly. So if you have one person show up and then they try to brief 6 other people, all of those people that were showing up at the meetings were directly involved in implementation, building the systems. And then so we talked to Guidehouse about, okay, we're through the sprint, right? We need to make it through the sprint. How soon and how properly can we taper? And then we transitioned some roles and responsibilities over to the state personnel, which we were able to hire, but because, you know, it takes time to hire limited service positions in the state, we didn't have them at the beginning of the implementation. So Guidehouse was providing us bridge support for that implementation work.
Okay.
I do know those sections of the article you're referring to, Representative. I think that those people have never built a program and don't understand how you have to work together to actually launch something that's complicated.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And then, so do you feel like you have steps in place? I mean, you talked about things moving fast, and that's what's going to happen. When we have emergencies, things have to move fast. So do you feel like you have the right processes in place so that we can focus more on getting money out to the people who need it rather than building the system at this point?
Yes, Representative. I think it's funny because the reporter cast it as a failure on the state to control costs, but we had identified and made plans to adjust the administrative spend rate within 2 payment cycles. So we saw an invoice that was like, okay, this is a little bit higher than we would like to see. We're putting a lot of time and effort. We talked about whether or not that was justified, and we decided it was. We saw the second one, we forecasted out, and we said, look, okay, we need to figure out a different way to do this. And that's good contract management.
Right.
So I mean, it's not like we left this sitting for a year. It was within 2 months that we had identified and adjusted. So sorry if I'm a little
for next time.
indignant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for answering those questions and for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
If there's nothing else you want to add on that point, you're welcome to move into the recent disaster declaration.
Yes, Madam Chair. So we had our apologies for being glib. We had our 3rd anniversary flood, 3 years in a row. We were fortunate that it was a smaller event, but it did impact on essentially the same day. It was primarily focused in the Sutton area, impacted 4 or 5 municipalities pretty significantly. We worked with the Agency of Transportation and cataloged the damages from that flood. And they were over the public assistance threshold that FEMA uses to make recommendations to the president about a disaster declaration. I would say that they weren't massively exceeding them, right? It was still, it was above the state thresholds, but it, I believe, was less than 2 times the state threshold. So we believed we should get a disaster declaration, particularly since the communities involved, some of them were impacted for the 3rd time in 3 years. So that was part of our argument for receiving a disaster declaration. The president unfortunately denied that disaster declaration. I believe it was October 22nd was when we received that, 21st or 22nd. I do know that we are currently in the appeal period, and we have until November 21st to appeal. Vermont Emergency Management is working with the Agency of Transportation and the towns impacted to collect any additional information we can use to support an appeal submission of that decision to deny the disaster declaration. I think we do need to uncover some new facts, essentially frame our argument a little bit more strongly. One of the things that we're exploring is that FEMA's process looks at the cost to repair something to pre-disaster conditions. And with Vermont's codes and standards, that is a fictional number, right? A bridge that may cost a certain amount to repair to its pre-disaster condition, if it triggers codes and standards, that's not the actual cost. And in some cases, those are dramatically different numbers. Because Vermont has codes and standards that are, progressive isn't the right term, but they lead to us being stronger going forward. They protect infrastructure from future damage, and they do cost a little bit more. So we have stronger codes and standards than many other states. And so I think FEMA's system doesn't necessarily capture that accurately. And I think the final decision on whether or not to submit that appeal lies with the governor, but we're preparing as strong of a package as we can for him to consider submitting. I think we do need to make sure we're presenting an argument for why we're appealing and not just that we disagree with the determination.
What does the timeline look like for an appeal?
So we have to submit by end of day on the 21st of November. So we have 8 days remaining in the appeal window. Because we had requested that disaster declaration some time ago, but the denial itself did not come until the third week of October. So our appeal window is based on when we received the denial.
And then how long does it? I don't want to think usually, because usually it seems very irrelevant lately, but do you have any expectations of when you would hear back?
I don't, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, it's very rare for us to receive a denial of this case, so we don't have a lot of background to go off of here.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
Doug, do you know if the other states that were denying are also appealing their denials?
Representative, I would say I don't really have firsthand knowledge. I know the team has been talking to some of the other states that have been impacted, and we're reviewing appeals. We know that appeals have been submitted this year to some of the president's other decisions. So we're reviewing those to see how they built them, if they've, and to Madam Chair's question, we're trying to get a feel for what kind of timeline we might expect, trying to look at what appeals have been responded to this year. Because I would say the current approach to disaster declarations is certainly different than the historical approach that we become accustomed to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
And Mr. Farnum, do you have any idea of the time frame after the appeal is made when you hear back, or is it?
I don't believe there are any fixed timelines. Just like with our declaration request, I think the president has however much time the president decides to take to either respond quickly or consider what to do.
And how much is this state, what's the total that was requested? I'm sorry if you said this already.
So, Madam Chair, I believe this was right around $2 million or so.
Okay. You did say that, I'm sorry.
But the thing we're trying to compile for our appeal submission is that when you add in codes and standards estimates, you would we believe we might more than double that amount. So I think that's, and whether or not a disaster is declared, municipalities would be subject to the same expense, whether or not a disaster was declared.
So you're expecting about $4 million in expenses for Vermonters?
Yes, it does come down to one bridge in particular is a huge variable in the calculation. Okay. I believe it's in Sutton. Hopefully I'm not incorrect there.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and thanks for joining us virtually. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Madam Chair.
Folks, we are going to take a break until 10:40.
Wow. Good.
And if you're not back in your seats at